Oh no! Did you know that We Never Learn features suggestive content and is relatively risque? Oh no! Think of the children! We cannot let the children see this! Think of the children! Okay, is that good enough? Is that cool? Like, did I get across? I think that was good enough.
Yeah, Harems.
Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L coming in today with a We Never Learn video. The first video in what will be a mini series of just We Never Learn review videos and other bonus topics. This first one is going to be a fun little discussion. As you can see in the title of the video, I went and I counted the lines of all the female characters, well no, the main female characters in We Never Learn. All so I can answer the question, who was the winner of Season 1? Specifically Season 1, Season 2 is going on right now. I'm not doing Season 2, it's Season 1. It's a Season 1 review. Anyway, who was the winner of Season 1? Here we are. I have an answer for you and also some other cool little insights. So without further ado, here are the numbers. Here are the lines. Who won? Well, was it surprising? It's 280 for Ogata, 507 for Furuhashi, 523 for Uraka, and 256 for Kirisu, and 153 for Asumi. So, really, when you look at the numbers, is it really a surprise that Uraka or Furuhashi ended up being the ones with the most dialogue in the series? Not really. I mean, we all watched the series, but like I said, there are some other really cool insights that come out from the counting that I did. One caveat I want you to know though is that, it wasn't a perfect count. When it came to what a line was, I tried to be reasonable. I discounted anything that were just grunts or sighs or just because that doesn't really count as a line, and unfortunately that really put Ogata in a disadvantage. More on that later. I also tried to be careful with sentence counts. If it was a one-word sentence, it would usually be tacked on to another line, so that together was one line. Anyway, when you look at these numbers, you should assume that there's a 5% error, but for the purposes of our discussion, these numbers are going to be good enough because they give you the proper hierarchy of how things went down. Now, if you were to ask me who won in Season 1 of We Never Learn when it comes to the harem and who's going to be that kid's final girlfriend, well, by sheer line total, you'd think Uraka, but really, it was Furuhashi. She was the legitimate winner here, although Uraka has a really strong claim to the throne. And the reason I can tell you that is because Furuhashi was the one who had lines in every single episode. So here's the table of all the lines that were added per episode. Don't mind Kirisu and Asumi, they really don't matter for this particular part of the discussion. It's really the main three girls. Now the thing here was Furuhashi's lowest line count was 11, and that occurred in episode 11. Episode 11, for the record, was the episode where Kirisu was stuck in a schoolgirl's uniform, and they unfortunately were almost seen by Ogata and Furuhashi. Anyway, when you compare it to the other two main girls, Furuhashi has more lines at her minimum count than the other two girls do. And there are a few episodes where the other two girls just didn't show up altogether. For instance, episode 12 for Ogata and episode 11 for Uraka. While Furuhashi doesn't have the highest line count per episode compared to the other girls, she definitely has the most consistent, and it ultimately creates the impression that she was a consistent force throughout the anime. Now, another thing that would tell you that she was also kind of the winner was the fact that the final episode of the first season had heavy focus on her, and in terms of that line count, it was really interesting. In an episode that seemed like it was going to be balanced towards all the girls, it was interesting that Furuhashi came away largely the winner. Although I would say it was also interesting that Kirisu and Asumi ended up with the same number of lines between the two of them. So my conclusions from this data when it came to Furuhashi, I feel like she really was the winner, again, because she was a consistent part. Uraka, however, what was really interesting about her and her line count was that Uraka came in hard, and a lot of times she really stole the show with how many lines she had compared to everyone else. It was actually really interesting how the anime went about that. When you looked at the anime episodes, Uraka had perspective shifted to her very often. Well, at least more often compared to the other girls. We got to see her backstory, we got to see her flashbacks, we got to see two flashbacks from her that were relatively longer than what the other girls got. That was how Uraka ended up getting more lines. Another thing that was really interesting too when it came to Uraka's lines were that she's a really fast talker and she talks a lot. She gives a lot of different thoughts. So her line count was inflated just because of that nature. It was really interesting when you look back to the first episode and you see how these natures work out. Furuhashi in the first episode was the quieter of the two, with Ogata taking charge. And for those first couple of episodes where Furuhashi hadn't developed her dynamic with the main character Yuiga, she was quieter and she had reduced line counts. So it was really interesting to see how those various characteristics ended up inflating the counts. Now the real big thing that is also worth pointing out here is that Ogata, who was pretty much presented as one of the two main girls, got so little that Kirisu, the one who was missing in so many episodes, was able to catch up to her with 280 versus 256. If there's one thing you should take away from this, is that Ogata did not have that much of a strong presence in the anime. But what's really interesting is understanding what went down with her line count and what was going on with the character. So the first episode gave us a pretty good picture. Ogata had 61 lines versus Furuhashi's 53 lines. And you know, if you think back, that would make sense to you because Ogata was relatively well spoken for that particular episode. What ended up happening was that Ogata came in with a very specific purpose in the story. And when you looked at her lines, they didn't really revolve around the drama of falling in love with a boy. Instead, the story used her very often to highlight the problems with their past tutors, or in the case of the first episode, it used her to establish the conflict that the two girls were going through. Because Furuhashi was the soft-spoken one at that period in time, Ogata was the one responsible for carrying the show. And unfortunately, how that ended up manifesting was that once we got past that initial conflict setup point, was that Ogata just kind of fell down. And another thing that didn't help her is that she's a relatively quiet character that grunts and sighs a lot. Effectively, when you're looking at, you know, episode 10 and beyond, she is pretty much just like a small, adorable woodland animal. But unfortunately, that doesn't really do much for anyone watching this. Like, yes, it is cute that he is patting her head, but that's not really that great when all the other girls are actually talking to the kid. So that was one thing that occurred with that particular character. Once she came in and she established her conflicts, it seemed like the story just didn't know what to do with her. Okay, now I want to address the elephant in the room, which is the romantic aspect of Ogata's screen time. I said that the story didn't really know what to do with her after it established her conflicts, but when it also came to romance, it seemed like the story didn't know what to do after a certain point. When you look at the line counts, Ogata in the first 5 episodes has more of a presence than Ogata in the last 5 episodes. And those first 5 episodes are really the spots where you're really seeing any kind of romantic development. But after it got to a certain point, it just kind of fizzled out. And as you go towards the end of the series, you'll see that Ogata was more about her conflicts than the actual harem aspect. I think one good example of the problems with Ogata's screen time is really the episode where she and Kirisu are in the same room. It ultimately turns into an episode about Ogata coming to understand different aspects of Kirisu. This occurred in episode 9, and it was the most lines that Ogata had since episode 5. And if you recall, episode 5 was the big one where she fell and kissed Yuiga in the fall. So it was really interesting to see the time that she got more lines was when she was face to face with her arch nemesis effectively, which is a contrast to the other girls who had so much face to face time and their line counts coming from their drama with Yuiga. That leads me to another point with Ogata. When you look at the first episode, you might think that Furuhashi is the shy one compared to Ogata, but as you go further in the episodes, you realize that she is really the quiet one. And another thing that really messed with Ogata is that she had more people coming in on her particular storylines. And this is something that Uraka also did to really good effect, is that she would usually ride on other people's storylines. But with Ogata, a good example was like episode 4. Episode 4 was the one that introduced Ogata's kind of weird little stalker friend there, and unfortunately she ends up taking more of the narrative away from Ogata, even though it was a Ogata-centric episode. So it was really interesting seeing how all these dynamics ended up affecting the other characters. Furuhashi gains her stride once she starts up the sensei and student dynamic with Yuiga. Uraka is just always making herself available, and she has the story's narrative focusing specifically on her to give us her backstory at many times. And then you had Ogata, who just kind of faded into the background because it seems like the story just didn't know what to do with her, and the character herself was much too quiet. Really interesting to see how all those things came together to give us the final counts. And again, I do think Furuhashi is the winner in the first season, along with Uraka as a close second. The only reason that Furuhashi is just edging her out, in my opinion, is just because she's the one that had the season finale focused on her. And also because she's a consistent force throughout all episodes. On the other two people, Kirisu and Asumi, they are so far behind. There's not much value to speaking about them too much. The interesting thing that I can say is that Asumi had the most lines in an introductory episode, beating out Uraka. Although it's important to note that Uraka ultimately beats out everyone else in terms of the most lines spoken in an episode, that being episode 12. With 127 lines. Anyway, that's it. That's the fun little trivia. I hope you really appreciated that. I hope you found that interesting. If you were someone who felt like Ogata was just underdeveloped throughout the series, hey, look, you got proof. There's proof to say that maybe she was underdeveloped. Because when you look at her lines, there's a case to be made there. I would also say that maybe Asumi was a little bit more developed than Ogata in the end. But that might be a bias due to the recency bias. The unfortunate reality with Ogata is that if you came out of the anime with the impression that Ogata didn't really do much, it might be because past episode 9, she had very diminished line counts, and that would create the effect that she wasn't really doing much. Anyway, those are the line counts and the quick discussion about the line counts. I really hope you enjoyed the video. And that's the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Hope you enjoyed. I can let you know there will be some more We Never Learn videos coming to the channel, probably, most likely, definitely. Also, YouTube doesn't like me, so I would greatly appreciate if you shared the video out to more We Never Learn fans. That would just be great for me, because again, YouTube.